Jonathan finally did it. He slammed the shovel into the dirt and wiped the sweat from his forehead. For 3 years, the neighbor's dog had barked at everything. The mailman, the wind, even the sound of the grass growing. It had pushed him to a dark place where sleep didn't exist. Now, the backyard was finally quiet. He felt a strange sense of peace as he walked back toward his porch. He just wanted to go inside, cook a steak, and sleep for 12 hours. But as he reached for the doorknob, he saw it. The dog was sitting right there on the welcome mat. It wasn't messy or hurt. It looked exactly like it did yesterday. It just sat there, head tilted, watching him with big, black eyes. Jonathan froze. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was just seeing things because he was so tired. He kicked his foot out to scare it away, but his shoe went right through the animal like it was made of smoke. The dog didn't move an inch. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. He scrambled inside and locked the door, leaning his back against the wood. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. Then, a sharp, loud bark sounded from right outside the door. He jumped, looking through the peephole, but the porch was totally empty. The silence he had worked so hard for was already gone. The dog followed him everywhere, but only he could see it. It sat at the foot of his bed. It sat on the kitchen counter. It sat in the passenger seat of his truck, and the barking, it was constant. It was a sharp, piercing sound that felt like a needle poking his brain. He invited his neighbor over for a beer, hoping the presence of another person would make the ghost go away. They sat in the living room, and the dog stood right between them, barking its head off. "Do you hear that?" Jonathan asked, his hands shaking so hard he spilled his drink. The neighbor looked around, confused. "Hear what? It's quiet as a grave in here, man. Honestly, it's a bit weird how quiet it is without your dog around." Jonathan realized then that he was the only one in this nightmare. As soon as the neighbor left, Jonathan called Gabriel. Gabriel is a detective in town who dealt with things that didn't make sense. When Gabriel walked into the house, he didn't even look at the dog, even though Jonathan was pointing right at it. "I killed it, Gabriel. I buried it in the woods. Why is it still here? Why won't it stop making that noise?" Jonathan was crying now, the sound of the barks echoing off the walls. Gabriel sat down at the kitchen table and folded his hands. He didn't look scared, he looked like a judge. "You did a bad thing, Jonathan. You think you can just remove something from the world because it bothers you. That's not how life works." Jonathan paced back and forth, stepping through the ghostly dog over and over. "I just wanted to sleep. It was driving me crazy." Gabriel shook his head slowly. "The dog was just being a dog. You were the one who chose to be a killer. Now, you've tied yourself to it." The dog let out a howl that made the windows rattle, but Gabriel didn't even flinch. "Why can't you hear it?" Jonathan screamed, covering his ears with his palms. Gabriel stood up and walked toward the door. "Because it's not the dog barking, Jonathan. It's your own guilt, making a noise you can't ignore. You committed a crime, and the universe doesn't let things like that go unpunished. You wanted the dog to be quiet, and now the dog is the only thing you'll ever hear." Jonathan grabbed Gabriel's arm, begging for help. "There has to be a way to fix this. I'll do anything. I can't live like this. The noise is inside my head now. It's everywhere." Gabriel looked at him with pity. "There is one way to end it, but you aren't going to like the trade, huh?" Gabriel told Jonathan that a life for a life was the only way to balance the scales. "You have to go back to the spot where you buried him," Gabriel said. "You have to sit there all night and listen. Don't move. Don't run. If you can make it until the sun comes up, the barking will stop." Jonathan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight and ran into the woods. The barking was so loud, Now it felt like his ears were going to bleed. Every step he took, the dog was right at his heels, nipping at his phantom ankles. He reached the mound of fresh dirt and sat down on a fallen log. The woods were dark and thick, but he could see the dog clearly. It sat on top of the grave and began to bark at the moon. Jonathan closed his eyes and tried to think of anything else, but the sound was like a hammer. He started to apologize. He whispered, "I am sorry," over and over again into the darkness. He promised to be a better man. He promised to never lose his temper again. But the dog didn't care about promises. It just kept barking, its chest heaving with every loud yelp. The hours felt like years. Jonathan felt the cold ground sap the heat from his body, but he stayed still, just like Gabriel told him to. He was terrified, but more than that, he was tired. Around 4 in the morning, the barking suddenly changed. It didn't stop, but it became muffled, like it was coming from deep underground. Jonathan opened his eyes and looked at his hands. They looked strange in the moonlight. They were becoming pale and see-through. He tried to stand up, but his legs felt heavy and short. He looked down and saw that he was no longer wearing boots. He had paws. He tried to scream for help, but the only sound that came out of his throat was a sharp, loud bark. He looked up and saw a man standing over the grave. The man looked exactly like Jonathan. The man was holding a shovel and had a look of pure relief on his face. This other Jonathan looked down at the ghostly dog sitting on the grave and smiled. It wasn't a mean smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally found peace. The new Jonathan turned around and started walking back toward the house, whistling a quiet tune. Jonathan tried to follow him, tried to grab his pant leg, but his ghostly teeth just slipped through the fabric. He was stuck. He was sitting on his own grave, and he realized with a shock that he couldn't leave this spot. The crime had been punished in the most direct way possible. The roles had been swapped. The sun began to rise, and Gabriel walked into the clearing. He saw the new Jonathan walking out of the woods, looking healthy and happy. They passed each other without saying a word, but Gabriel gave him a small nod. Gabriel then walked over to the grave. He looked down at the small, shimmering ghost dog that was sitting there. The ghost dog had Jonathan's eyes, full of fear, regret, and confusion. "You wanted the dog to stop barking, Jonathan," Gabriel said softly. "And it did. That man walking back to your house will never hurt a fly. He's going to live a long, quiet life in your home, in your bed, with your name." Jonathan let out a long, mournful howl. He wanted to tell Gabriel to stop him, to fix it, to give him his body back, but Gabriel just turned away. "You didn't value your life enough to keep your soul clean. So, the soul of the innocent took the house, and the soul of the guilty took the cage." Gabriel walked away, leaving Jonathan alone in the woods. Jonathan tried to run after him, but as soon as he reached the edge of the clearing, an invisible chain jerked him back. He was tied to the spot where he had committed his crime. He sat back down on the dirt, feeling the weight of eternity. Years went by. A new family eventually moved into the house. After the other, Jonathan passed away, peacefully in his sleep. The new family had children and a cat. They loved the big backyard and the quiet woods. One evening, the father was out cutting the grass near the edge of the trees. He stopped the mower because he thought he heard something. It sounded like a dog barking, but it was faint, like it was coming from another room. He looked into the woods, but saw nothing but shadows. Inside the house, the children were playing, and they never heard a thing. But Jonathan was there. He was always there, standing by the main door, invisible and trapped. He watched the new family live the life he had thrown away. Every time they laughed, he felt a sting of pain. Every time they were quiet, he felt the urge to scream. But he couldn't scream. He could only bark. He barked at the door. He barked at the moon. and he barked at the memories of his own mistakes. Nobody ever came to help him. Nobody ever heard him. He had become the very thing he hated, and he was forced to endure the noise forever. It was a satisfied end for the universe, even if it was a nightmare for the man. The silence was finally perfect for everyone, except for him.